I'm Pam Howard, and this is the Classic Tailored Shirt. Before we get into any pattern information, let's just go over the anatomy of a shirt. This is an example, the one that you're going to make, of a classic tailored shirt. A classic tailored shirt has a separate collar and collar band. It has a front that is not darted generally, one pocket that is top stitched on, a separate sleeve with cuffs, a continuous placket, and the shirt is pleated into the cuff. Also on back, there is usually a separate yoke that are two pieces of fabric, a double yoke onto the shirt. Also the back of the shirt that is on the fold of the fabric. And that also, there is a front band that is formed by folding the fabric twice to complete the front band, and also buttons and buttonholes that go down the front band. Also, there's usually a shaped hemline, which this one has, and all of the seams are finished on the inside. And they are flat felled. Let's talk a little bit more about the pattern that you're going to be using. For this shirt, we used Quick Sew pattern number 3555, and it's view A, which is the long sleeve shirt. There is another view there, which is a short sleeve shirt, but we're going to be making view A. Also, other options, if you decide you would still like this classic tailored shirt, you can make a darted version. For that shirt, you could use Quick Sew number 3027 that has a darted version, vertical darts, and also a bust dart. This shirt also has the yoke on the back, the separate collar and collar band, the front band with the buttonholes and the buttons, and the shirt tail hem. If you choose a pattern that is for plus sizes, there's also a Quick Sew pattern, which is number 3586, and it is also view A, which has the same features as Quick Sew number 3555. And if you've chosen to make a men's shirt, and I'm hoping to get some men to take this class and will be brave enough to make their own shirts, one shirt to consider is Quick Sew number 3422, also view A, also has a pocket on the left front. The version for plus size does not give a pocket option for the long sleeve, but there is a pocket in the pattern for the short sleeve. Feel free to use that pocket for the long sleeve version, view A. So now we're at the point where I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the pattern. If you've chosen to sew this Quick Sew pattern, which is Quick Sew 3555, you're going to need to do a little bit of pattern work to make sure that you have the right seam allowances for the type of seams you're going to sew in the shirt. So for this Quick Sew pattern and many of the other ones that I've shown you here today, they on the guide sheet will tell you that they only have 1/4 inch seam allowances in the pattern. Well, in order to make this shirt with the type of seams that we're going to do, we're going to need to add 3/8 of an inch to all outer edges of all pattern pieces, with a couple of exceptions that I'm going to show you pretty soon. Now, if you've chosen to use any other pattern line that has typical 5/8 of an inch seam allowances, you won't need to do anything to those patterns, but just refer to the guide sheet to see on that pattern what seam allowance you have for that style. Now, here's what we're going to do. I've got an example here of pattern pieces that I've traced off of the original pattern, and for this class using this pattern you will need to use tracing paper, which you can get from any art supply store, or even a doctor friend of yours if they have exam paper that they use in their offices. Rolls of exam paper also make good pattern tracing paper. So what I've done is to trace the pattern off, and I'm going to show you on the yoke piece how to extend the seam allowances on your pattern to be able to use it to make this shirt. On the other two pieces, the upper collar and the collar stand, I've already included 5/8 of an inch in the tracing, but I'm going to show you your initial trace, what you're going to do. If you can find one of these double tracing wheels, and we have a resource list with your class that'll tell you where you can acquire some of these notions. But this is a double tracing wheel, which is a really good gadget to have. I'm so glad that I was able to find this, because you can move these wheels wherever you need to within these slots to get the amount of seam allowance that you need to add to a pattern. And where I've placed them now is exactly 3/8 of an inch apart. So what I'm going to do is to use carbon paper that I've gotten from the office supply store, and I'm going to put it beneath the pattern so that you can see the original lines that you've traced. And I'm going to take my double tracing wheel, and one wheel is aligned along the original line of the pattern. The other one is 3/8 of an inch away, so we get the additional seam allowance that we need. And you're just going to bear down a little bit so that the carbon will transfer through to your pattern. And as you see, when I lift it up, you're beginning to add 3/8 of an inch all around this pattern. When you get to the edge, just extend it out so you'll have that extra piece for the next step. And then we're going around the neck. And just move the paper as you need, and just continue around that entire piece until you get all of that extra seam allowance that you're going to need to make this garment. Now I'm going to finish this edge up, and then I'll show you what it looks like after it's all done. Here's that same pattern piece that's been traced all around, and as you can tell, we have our original line and we have the line that's 3/8 of an inch beyond that, all around it, the neck edge, the shoulders, where the yoke meets the front. This is where the sleeve goes in, and this is where the back is attached onto the yoke. Now I have two places on this pattern that you will not need to extend, and I'm going to show you those right now. After you've traced off the front of your pattern onto the paper, and you've traced where the pocket goes, all of your center front lines, your fold lines, and added all of your seam allowances to the side, to where the sleeve goes in the armhole, right at the shoulder line where the yoke attaches to the fronts, around the neck. Even add 3/8 of an inch to the bottom, because it's better to have a longer shirt than you need than one that's too short. You can always cut it off if the shirt is a little bit too long. The one place on the front pattern piece that you will not need to add anything is along the very front where you've cut, that forms the front bands. You don't have to add anything to that. Always remember that. Before you start to cut, watch this part of the session again to remind you that you don't need to add anything to the very front of the pattern. Also, there's one more place that you don't have to add anything to. This is the back of the shirt. The yoke sits above this, so you're going to add your 3/8 of an inch seam allowance to the top, also within the armhole, down the sides, around the bottom, just as you did on the front, but your center back fold line is exactly where it needs to be. To remember what we're doing, we're adding 3/8 of an inch because the pattern already has 1/4 inch allowed in the pattern design So we're creating what is equal to a 5/8 inch seam allowance to be able to make this shirt and do all of the seam finishes that we're about to do. Also, to remind you that after you've done all of your pattern work and you lay it on your fabric to be able to cut it out, don't remove any of your pattern pieces, because in the next lesson we're going to talk more about what you need to do after the pattern is on the fabric to do your tailor's tacks and all other markings. So as you see here, I have mine already cut out. But I don't want you to cut yours out yet, because this is just a lesson on pattern work that you're going to do in preparation for cutting out, because I have some more information to give you about that in the next lesson. So now let's talk about the fabric choices that you can make to make this shirt, and also some interfacing choices. What I have here are a few samples of fabrics that would make beautiful classic tailored shirts. The first choice is a lightweight linen, which is this sample here. The beauty of linen is that it's a natural fiber and you can crease it with your fingers as need be. And that helps to set up your seam allowances in future lessons. This next sample is a 100% cotton broadcloth. Any natural fiber is going to work, and this is a medium weight broadcloth. Another choice is 100% cotton Oxford cloth. A lot of men's shirts are made out of that, but a lot of lady shirts are too. This fabric is the same one that I have on. Actually, this is the front side or right side of the fabric, and it has a little higher sheen that I wanted on my shirt, so I used the wrong side of the fabric, which is a little duller face, because I didn't want a shirt that had a high sheen to it. And one other choice, if you want to make a shirt that maybe you wear in the fall or the winter, is like a pinwheel corduroy that's 100% cotton. So there are many choices that you can make to make a classic tailored shirt. Now let's talk a little bit about interfacing choices. This is a sample of 100% cotton woven fusible. It's smooth on the face, and when you turn it over, it has a sheen to it because that is the fusible resin that's on the back of your interfacing. And I'll give you some more information about the differences after I show you two more. This one is a non-woven fusible. And if you notice, it is non-woven. There are fibers that are pressed together to create this interfacing, and this is the resin that's on the back, and you can tell because the resin side is shinier than the front side or right side. This interfacing is called soft knit, is an all bias stretch, and it's in the knit category. And when you look on the back side of it, you won't see as much sheen as you did on the other two, but you can feel it that it's a little more bumpy than the face side. The face side is a bit smoother. Now the differences in these three choices is the fact that once they are fused in, this will give you a softer cuff or collar or band because it's knit and it is softer. This one that's the non-woven fusible will give you a little firmer cuff, collar, and band. This woven fusible, when put in, will give you a really firm collar, cuff, and collar band. And it's perfectly up to you to decide which one you want to use. Always, the rule is test, test, test on the fabric that you've decided to use to determine how stiff or soft you want those places to be on your shirt. One thing to remember also with the woven cotton one is you have to put it on grain just like you do with the fabric when you're cutting it out because it is woven. So to make sure that your pieces that are interfaced stay on grain, the collar, the band, and the cuffs, make sure that when you lay it out on this particular one that is woven or any woven interfacing, that you lay it out on grain so you won't get any twist in that particular area of your shirt. With the non-woven fusible, it's not so necessary to lay it out on grain because it is non-woven. It doesn't have a grain on it. Now with the knits, depending on which knit you use, this one has about the same amount of stretch in every direction. So you just want it in a direction, but you don't have to necessarily put it on grain. Now some of the other ones have a lot of stretch in the crosswise direction and very little stretch in the lengthwise direction. So when you lay those out, you want to make sure that your cuff falls and the collar band falls in the area that is very limited stretch. So, but with any interfacing choice, follow your manufacturer's suggestions as to how to fuse, the right temperature for your iron, and that information comes along wrapped around the bolt of every interfacing choice. So now we're going to talk about some of the supplies that you might be using to make your classic tailored shirt that are generally not supplies that you would have. So I'm going to just show you a few of those. The first one is this Teflon iron shoe. This is mentioned on your supply list, and this is a product from a company called Bonash, and you can get it from their website. And the iron shoe protects your iron, and it really is important to use when you're using fusible interfacings because you won't get any of the resin to come through the interfacing as you're pressing it to go onto the sole plate of your iron, so you won't have to keep cleaning it. But this particular item is very good to have, so contact them. It's called a Teflon iron shoe. Also remember that you do have course materials and a resource list to let you know where to get all of these things that I'm going to talk about. One little fun gadget is a buttonhole cutter and block. All this is a chisel with a protector over it so you won't cut yourself or your tables, and also to remember that you're always going to use the block underneath your fabric as you're cutting open your buttonholes to protect your table so you won't get gashes in your table at home. Another item is a tailor's ham, and it looks exactly as it's described. It's shaped like a canned ham, and it has one side that is wool and the other side that's cotton, and you use it based on the type of fabric that you're pressing. So you get to use the different sides. Also, you notice that there's a wide end and a narrow end, and so when you get ready to press things that need to go over curved surfaces, you can turn it based on where you need it to go, based on the shape on the ham. So you might be wondering why it has two different sides. When you're pressing wools, you'll use the wool side, and when you're pressing cottons or other lightweight fabrics, you're going to use the cotton side. Another great item is a sleeve board. Well, this is also good for pants legs or any other small area in a garment that you're making, and you want to be able to press it without putting it on the full ironing board. So as you notice, this has a wider side, and it also has a narrower side. So you use it to your advantage. Whatever item you need to press, if it's too small for that side, then you just turn the item over to use the smaller side of the sleeve board. All these things are mentioned on your resource materials and where you get them. So that's pretty much all I have to tell you about your notions that you're going to be using for the class. I'm Pam Howard. This is the Classic Tailored Shirt.